this scene corresponds to this track and this scene, and then we move on to this track, and then we move on to this track. So this is a kind of a pretty unique approach to deciding a narrative structure. I mean, because I listened to the album a couple times, and it does have a shape to it. And it's really cool that you had your comic book series not identify itself, but be correlative with the shape of the album. You know, how did you come up with that approach? I mean, you said that, okay, I'm listening to this and this is a movie and everything. And so you may have already answered this question, but if you want to say more about it, I'd love to hear it.
It totally. It's like I was saying, it really did come down to listening and I think envisioning it as a movie first, really kind of because I pictured it more like as this is the corresponding soundtrack almost to the movie, and I think that really it's really built. Like when I'm looking at it, the panel by panel, I'm almost seeing it as like, wow, this could be a storyboard, like handed over to, okay, here's your storyboard, make the movie based on this.
Welcome to the podcast Homespun Script. My guest today is I.S. Fergus, author of the comic book series Children of the Night. Set in a dystopic future circa 2335, the series documents the waning professional days of Detective John Black as he gradually but persistently uncovers and exposes the nefarious machinations of the powerful Watanabe Corporation, all in the process of investigating the kidnapping of a homeless boy. Rife with futuristic depictions of ninjas, samurai, and cowboys, Children of the Night fleshes out a cyberpunk world eerily similar to our own. Fergus, thanks for joining me. Pleasure to talk with you today.
Pleasure talking to you. Thanks for having me. It's I'm glad to be on.
Cool, man. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm born and raised Canadian. I was born in Vancouver, but I've moved up north, so I'm far up in the mountains now, deep north. But I'm an amateur author here. That's really it. I'm not a lot going on. Just really kind of working and writing and trying to make writing a more real thing in my life. I've had a variety of different hobbies in life, but writing's always kind of been there. And ever since I was fairly young, I've always loved being a storyteller. I'm an avid Dungeons and Dragons player, and I've always find myself in the DM seats because I'm constantly, homebrewing stories. So storytelling is what I do. It's what I love. And so I think when it came to writing, that ended up kind of becoming a precedent after trying a different, an assorted of hobbies in my 20s. I think writing's kind of taken its full front stage, we'll say.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. Well, you're in very good company being, someone who works full time and also writes on the side, and also being a Dungeons and Dragons type guy. Had a few of those on here as well. And it's proven to be like an excellent springboard for narrative storytelling and developing that skill, because it really is a skill. And as a dungeon master, I'm sure you know that full well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is funny. Like you said, I do find as I network and find kind of writing communities and connect with people online, I do find that there is an odd correlation between writers and dungeon masters of in D&D. So it's interesting that you notice that as well, because I think when someone is a storyteller, they just want to tell stories in any way that they can. And like you and I were kind of talking before recording about, it doesn't matter if it makes X amount of dollars. It's more just getting it in people's hands. I think that even goes into D&D, where obviously you're not making money dungeon mastering, but it's like, hey, I got a great story and I just want people to hear it. And with D&D, especially where it's so unique, where people can be part of it and evolve and change your story as you play with them. And you go, oh, okay, well, my ending originally will not work now. So let's work with how these people are working.
Yep. Time to improvise.
Yeah, exactly. I've been there. Yeah, no doubt.
So, Children of the Night is not quite a D&D set novel, but set in a cyberpunkish, I kind of thought as a cyberpunkish dystopic science fiction setting. Is that accurate enough?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I kind of go by the the tagline is it's a cyberpunk detective story, so
Okay.
you kind of nailed it right on the head. Very dystopian future, very cyberpunk. Huge influences. Like I never shy away from my influences. Huge influences from Blade Runner. Blade Runner's a big one.
Yeah.
Where that setting has always really fascinated me, and I think part of the fascination, especially with the cyberpunk genre, came from seeing Blade Runner at a very early age, kind of like as a child watching over my brother's shoulders. And so I'm not, as a child, not really getting the story, but I'm just immersed in the visual aspect. So I think that is kind of why at least a contribution to why the genre so spoke to me is because before any kind of stories came by, it was just like, whoa, what is this world that I'm seeing? I'm a child witnessing it. But of course, after rewatches as an adult and really getting immersed in what is cyberpunk, what is dystopia, what does that mean, and I'm sure living in today's world, it's crazy the parallels of certain dystopic topics that are like may have been sci-fi 20 years ago, but we're like, oh, we're living in it now.
Yeah, and that's sort of the high-tech, low-culture aesthetic of cyberpunk. It really appeals to me as well, and that's the big thing I caught out of Blade Runner as well. In addition to all the really cool stuff that Ridley Scott and the Philip K. Dick's novel did with that in terms of AI and stuff. But that's another topic. So how did you become, you said you became interested in this genre of cyberpunk initially by watching Blade Runner. Yeah. What other influences have you had there? Like, how'd you become interested in doing something?
Yeah, for sure. Another big influence is the film Dread. I would say my two big influences are two movies. Yeah, one of the other big influences would be a film Dread. I'm a big movie head, so I consume a lot of movies, and Dread being one of them. The Judge Dredd remake. Carl Urban, I think 2012. I might be wrong on the year, but the huge influences from were there. I would say like you've read the first two volumes there of my comic there. And I would say volume 1 really leans heavily into the aesthetics that you would see in Blade Runner. And then volume 2 starts kind of leaning into the aesthetics that you would see in Dread. Kind of more of that wasteland feel where, it's much less, it's more of a wasteland than anything. But yeah, I would say those are two of my biggest influences. I've watched a ton of different sci-fi and assorted, through the years, of course, when you're a child, you're just watching whatever's your parents are watching. So obviously Star Trek, Star Wars, everything you're consuming. And I think every kind of one of those stories where it's like introducing some kind of technology or some kind of AI, some kind of robot, something that isn't current. I would say any kind of thing that I consumed has a bit of it's left its mark in my writing, or left its mark at least in visuals, visual cues that I asked the actor to leave, or not actor, sorry, visual cues that I asked the artist to leave behind in the panels. I think, and then when it came to writing, my big influence, of course, is The Watchmen as well for a comic book. I'm kind of rambling and all over the place, but when it comes to visuals and the world building, I would say, it's Blade Runner and Dread. When it comes to the actual writing and the visual storytelling, Watchmen was a big one. Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons there. More of how to present a comic, not so much in the story itself, but more in the how to present the comic, how to tell a story in general. I found a lot of influence in The Watchmen there. So.
Cool. All right. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about the series. How did this series come to be?
Totally. Yeah. There's an artist, a musical artist, Laserhawk, who I've referenced a few times in my comic. As you open up one of the first pages is like, hey, listen to this album. It is a synthwave, retrowave, kind of dark album where it is. It's called Skull and Shark. It's by Laserhawk. I would say it's an album. I don't know. I was kind of consumed by it for a while. I would just kind of listen to it. And like I said, I've been writing for a long time. But in my 20s, just other hobbies, I was a serial hobbyist, we'll say. this album kind of took control of, like, not took control, bad wording. Let me rephrase that. This album kind of, I became very obsessed with it. I found it was quite, almost visual in its sound, in the sense where I could sit down and just kind of close my eyes and almost see a story build out. And during my 20s, I would usually take the train to work, so it was a good time to listen to music and kind of sit there. And I remember I would kind of be upset. I would talk to some people. I say, I had this great story in mind. I've been listening to this album, but I don't have the money to ever make this into a movie. Because when I was first visualizing it, I was like, man, this is a movie. I could make this as a movie. And I was kind of going, man, this is like a movie that would be, a $10 million budget, at least $100 million, the budget to make something like this. And I remember it kind of like dawned on me where I'm like, I'm a writer. I write. I have many Word documents. Like, I can just write this as a story. And so I started, once I was kind of dawned on myself being like, what's wrong with you? I started writing it as a book first. And then I was like, the visuals are so important to me. There's a lot like to really bring you into that world. I had never written a comic before. I had written a lot of short stories. I have an anthology of short stories that I kind of really, I had spent many years kind of working on. And that's where my original medium was. So I never dived into comic books themselves. But so I was kind of faced with like, I'm writing this book, but I think it's going to be more appealing. And to truly get my message out, I really feel like I need to add this visual element to it. So I started rewriting it as a comic book. I spoke about being a serial hobbyist. One of them is I used to draw a lot. I love drawing. But even I know my own capabilities and my own limits as an artist. And again, I was kind of faced with this, like, I could draw this, or I could get someone who can actually draw well and get an artist to help me work on this. And so that's kind of the decision I made, and the choice I made was to kind of put my own ego aside and say, okay, let's get an actual artist here. And so that's kind of how it began, was just a collaboration. I end up going online to, there's a lot of different, like, a lot of authors and a lot of artists are all looking to connect. And there's a lot of social media groups about that, just saying, hey, we're connecting comic writers to artists. And that's where I met my artist. His name is Epple. He's a very, very talented artist based in Indonesia. But it took some time. It took me a year of kind of sorting through portfolios. Really, again, it was, I have this vision in mind, and I really don't want to sacrifice, I want to make sure I'm getting the right artist. And finally, when him and I were able to connect, we seem to be on the same wavelength of what we envisioned the world would look like. We kind of discussed it, and he was super on board. So we've been working together for a couple years now, just bringing it to life slowly but surely, bringing it to life. So it's been quite a bit of a process. This story started off as I'd break down my stories by writing Post-it notes, and I'd tape them to my wall, and they would be my story beats. And for the first time, I had a really, when writing stories, I had a really good way of sorting my story beats, and it was with the music that I would listen to, Laserhawk, Skull and Shark, where I could really picture, okay, what's happening down to like the moments. In volume 2, there's an action scene where he's in his car and he's fighting guys on motorcycles. He's fighting ninjas on motorcycles, our protagonist there. And it's very much beat by beat two parts of King of the Streets, the song on the album. And very much, when there's a low, it's kind of like a flashback as the song da 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 da, and then as soon as the song picks back up, he's back out of the flashback. And so it started as Post-it notes on my wall to lay out the beats, and now it's become a series. I originally wrote it as one book. It is written. There's still some edits I'm now kind of going back in, but it is written as a whole volume. But just to get it out, I end up deciding to split it into 4 parts. So it's not an ongoing series. It is a start conclusion 4-part series. And once I'm done, once we've end up doing all the art and completing it, it will it'll only be printed as a full series. So
okay.
So once right now they're being kickstarted, they're going through crowdfunding process, one volume at a time. And then once we have them all, we'll only print it as an entire collection. And so those people who have the volumes, they'll have it as some kind of collector's item, but it wouldn't be printed like that again.
Cool. Yeah, there are a couple of things you said there that I want to follow up on.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, the first one is when I read the first couple pages of the comic, and you said, okay, this is highly influenced by Laserhawk's album Skull and Shark. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to listen to the album first.
Totally.
And I'm listening to it, and when it came to that track, King of the Streets, I'm like, oh God, this has got to be a fight scene of some sort. It just screams it.
You knew it. You felt it in the beats.
Yeah. But I didn't know at the time that the narrative structure of your comic series here has been, it's like overlaid 1-to-1 on the album. So like each scene and then I started reading the comic, like, oh, okay, this scene corresponds to this track and this scene, and then we move on to this track, and then we move on to this track. So this is a kind of a pretty unique approach to deciding a narrative structure. I mean, because I listened to the album a couple times, and it does have a shape to it. And it's really cool that you had your comic book series not identify itself, but be correlative with the shape of the album. How did you come up with that approach? I mean, you said that, okay, I'm listening to this, and this is a movie and everything. And so you may have already answered this question, but if you want to say more about it, I'd love to hear it.
It totally. It's like I was saying, it really did come down to listening and I think envisioning it as a movie first, really kind of because I pictured it more like as this is the corresponding soundtrack almost to the movie, and I think that really, it's really built, like when I'm looking at it, the panel by panel, I'm almost seeing it as like, wow, this could be a storyboard, like handed over to, okay, here's your storyboard, make the movie based on this. I'm not going to say I'm a perfect storyteller or whatnot, but that's kind of how it came to be was, the music has really, really influenced, obviously, beyond influence. It came to be because of it. And, there are truthfully near the end, there are, because as I've written it out and kind of started to re-edit, there are some track changes. So a few tracks that have kind of during the later chapters, a little out of place where you listen to track, 8 before 7 or whatever it might be. But for the most part, it really follows along beat by beat. It's something I've never really done before. Like my previous short stories they're not, accompanying any kind of music or anything like that. But it was something that I felt obviously was so important and so vital to this story. I think it was a huge, like I said, it was key to almost bringing it to life. I think that introduction song, Skull to Shark, that alone, as you listen to it, because you can hear the rain falling, and it kind of has that slow beat of like the very deep, almost like a creeping sound as it brings in, and hearing that, I think when I was first hearing the track was like, whoa, what am I entering? I think just the rainfall when I'm like sitting on a train, kind of closing my eyes, that rainfall kind of brought me like, okay, I'm in a physical place if I'm hearing rain, and that's the world that I kind of stepped into. And the artist Laserhawk, I end up emailing and just kind of on a whim, like, let's see, and he emailed me back and was like, yeah, dude, do it, like, I'm stoked. And I was like, yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was a moment of, I'm like, let's see if I can get that blessing. Cause like, I'm going to tell the story regardless, but if I have to, I would of course honor what he's the original dude. So I would of course honor whatever his wishes were, but having the track titles be like the chapter titles and everything, I think really helps, again, lends its connection to that Skull and Shark album there.
That's awesome. Yeah. The other thing, I actually had to read through it maybe 4 or 5 times. Okay. And well, part of this is because the comic books are not my go-to a lot of the time.
Totally.
And so I pay, reading the text that's not a problem. It's pretty straightforward, but it takes me a little longer to pick up on all the visuals. And so I'm going like through each frame, and I maybe a few frames through, looking at everything, and all of a sudden the track is over. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm missing something here. So
totally.
It's cool in a way because it lends to rereadability.
Fair, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It it almost forces the hand there. But
It certainly did in my case, and that's not
totally.
a bad thing at all. Yeah.
No, and there's a lot going on in the frames. There's a lot of like details in the first couple pages that I've kind of wanted to add that are like without spoiling anything. There are definitely things in the first couple frames where once you'll see the end, minute details that you think are nothing will soon become actual details that are needed. So yeah, I'm excited to see how it all plays out. And once it's all drawn out, and the artist Apple there, he's working diligently, powering through the comic. It's each originally it's interesting because I feel like I've almost evolved over the years as I've written it. Like I think I started writing it in my mid-20s and now I'm in my early mid-30s. So it has been, I think, about like 7 to 8 years that I've been actually kind of writing and rewriting. And I evolved as a person in certain aspects of my life. Obviously, I think anybody going from 20 to 30, anybody going 30 to 40, like I know I not saying I'm a better human being. I'm just saying as a human, I've evolved, we'll say. And as I have discovered parts of myself and parts of, like, I guess, human interaction, there's a lot of rewriting that has been done and a lot of changes. And when I originally handed him the script, I think it was, I forget, I don't have the exact page count in front of me, but over the year I have rehanded him the script and we've now added 40 additional pages to the original script. So it's definitely gotten, I'd say volume 1 is pretty close to its original volume 1 for my rewrites. Volume 2 is where the evolution starts happening. And then volume 3 and 4 are drastically different than they once were. And it even shows in the length of them. So in these first couple, I think they're about 30 pages each. Volume 1 and 2, and then volume 3 and 4 are pushing 40, almost 50 pages. So they really start to get a bit beefy there. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we're talking a pretty substantial graphic novel when everything is said and done, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah. Once it's done, I think it's going to be 155 or something like that. The whole series. Yeah.
Nice.
Be decent size for sure.
Let's talk a little bit more about the content and maybe, So the music sets the atmosphere. Definitely cyberpunky. I totally got Blade Runner vibes off those first few pages. I'm like,
absolutely.
This is.
There's no hiding from it. If you know Blade Runner, you go instantly. This person was inspired by Blade Runner for sure.
Yeah, well, everything cyberpunk is in some way. I think it's almost that and the Neuromancer, but that completely different book there. So we're set in a dystopic future, 2335 to be exact, and we have all kinds of cool stuff. We've got ninjas, we got samurais, we got cowboys, we got a hint toward AI that I want to hold off on for a moment. I want to ask you about that later.
For sure.
But, maybe describe this world a little bit for us. You already have some, but maybe the specifics of what's the setting here.
It's totally, yeah. So like you said, it's the year 2335. It takes place in a future where the map of the world has kind of been relayed out. There's no Canada, US. It's all the Americas. There's the West, and there will be more. There's actually, I'm kind of jumping a little bit ahead of myself, but there is a sequel to Children of the Nights in the works. Not more of a spiritual successor, not following John Black, but more of a a different story in the same world, we'll say. And that will definitely flesh out the world a bit more. But how I have it is, the at some point, Canada got annexed, and there's just the Americas. They've joined, and as all great dystopian futuristic stories, crime riddles the lands, and the governments find some type of solution, and the solution is to basically section off cities that they deem are the most safe and erect these big walls and section them off, and these are now districts. And the districts are quite large. They're cities and cities and cities large. It's not fully the scale of it isn't fully presented quite yet, but these districts and they're kind of labeled very simply, uptown, downtown, Chinatown, river district, whatever might be the case, very simple districts, and everything outside these walls has basically been destroyed via war, via crime, and now there is also a secondary solution to the crime. So government erects walls, then years later they're saying, hey, crime's back. We've got now a new initiative that came from Japan originally called the Samurai Initiative, which is basically you hand over the rights to decide to be judge, jury, and executioner on the spot. These samurai can make the executive decision to execute, and that was the government's next big thing. Is here's the samurai. Let's clean up the crime, and this of course fails horrifically, and this is now this
possibly
is
go wrong with something like that.
It did not go over well. So I don't have the years in front of me, but the Samurai Initiative lasted for a few decades, and the government said, okay, no more. The people have spoken. They don't want it. And so the story follows a man who was a samurai, and now he's like, I didn't know what to do with my life, so I became a private detective. That's John Black. And yeah, like you said, there's ninjas in the world. Ninjas it's explained more in volume 2 exactly who they are, but they're basically an anti-samurai group. There was a lot of influence when writing from Japanese. From the Japanese side, from Chinese side, I had a lot of, I guess, enmeshment. The idea of this is the future, everything is enmeshed with everything else. We're 300 years into the future, and so there's a lot of influence from all sorts of cultures there. But yeah, I guess that's kind of the sum of it. Is that's where we are in this world? Is that you have this behind us, the Samurai Initiative is behind us, and John, being an ex-samurai, has of course made a lot of enemies. So that's really the world that we're in right now. You have a lot of people in a not a great setting, and a lot of destruction left behind from the samurai.
Yeah, I got the impression that the government actually had very little to do with keeping order in whatever district John Black is in right now. And it had more to do with any order that was kept was a function of the Watanabe Corporation, which seems to be, I'm guessing that's going to be the main villain at the end in some capacity. But
yeah, it's funny because there's a couple people who are like, I'm kind of guessing the ending, and I'm like, it's less about like the ending. Like, there's definitely a few things that are pretty obvious, and if you're like, this is obvious, it's not really meant to be not obvious, but it's more of the whys and the hows that the story digs at. And but yeah, there's of course in the future, much like we're at right now, where we're finding out, corporations really control the government. Where I think we see that a lot now in like lobbying and different things like that in the real world. But this is a lot more on the nose, where it's really just how can a company thrive? The company comes first. So Watanabe Corp really does control everything, even the ins and outs of the gates. You see that are the gates opening up to the outside world, outside the districts, have Watanabe robots. So even in and out of these districts, it all comes back to the companies, and I think that's how we get to a dystopic future. Is when civilization is in companies' hands and privatized hands. That's it can only go one way, really.
Yeah. Well, in the first few pages, it seems pretty apparent that the Watanabe Corporation is in control, and they don't exactly have, the best of intentions for the good of humanity. And all right, that's fine. That's actually, I think, a really good way to start, because it doesn't have to be like the big surprise at the end. Oh, it's the evil corporation that's been in control of everything. But what's important there is the process by which that happens, and the sort of results that unfold from having a privatized company like that in charge of keeping any kind of order at all. And so in that sense, I'm kind of envisioning, I've only read the first 2 installments, but this is kind of a cautionary tale against that sort of thing. And it's what happens between here and there that's important, and not getting to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said that better myself. Yeah, like I said, there's definitely people who are like, "Oh, I think you made it too obvious," and I'm like, just
No.
wait, just wait, because yeah, at the end of the day, it's the story. When I wrote my first draft originally, 7 odd years ago, I had a friend read it,
Mhm.
and he started to read it, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll finish it, but I'm really curious to see." Certain characters' motivations, or he was bringing up like
Mhm.
why this person did this, and I was like, because they just did. And it wasn't
Mhm.
until my rewrites that I was like really starting to dive into like why does a person do a thing? Why does
Mhm.
and how does a person become corrupt? How does a person who you might have known in your life when you're a child, and
Mhm.
they might have been a childhood friend, or they might have been whatever might be the case, how does a person go from A to B?
Mhm.
And that started to become what Children of the Night really was like
Mhm.
these almost like these like I don't want to say stereotypes, but almost like yeah, these character archetypes, and then like how does a person really become that?
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
that's what my story became. So originally, when I'm listening to music, it was all about the visuals, these like crazy fights, these crazy scenes, and I'm like, great, there's this detective, and it's awesome, and there's this group of elite militia, and it's dope, cool. And then I
Mhm.
was like, but how and why? And it was almost like my friend, and this of course is 5 years ago,
Mhm.
him going, I can't wait to see why, and me going like, that's important. It's not just this visual, this crazy like story, but the why and how is so important. Where my original vision was like I almost wanted it originally to be surface level. Like originally I kind of
Mhm.
almost wanted to be, but I was like, nah, this there I guess I almost started seeing myself in certain characters and being like,
Mhm.
how did I become this person? I need to kind of flush this out, and
Mhm.
that's really kind of what happened. So I yeah I always tell people, if you think it's obvious, it might be, but it's the why and how that is really going to be of intrigue
Mhm.
to you. So
Yeah. And to expect like a surprise at the end is conflating genres here.
totally.
Yeah, I mean, because if I'm reading a murder mystery thriller or detective, like a straight up detective story, then yeah, you want to
Hmm.
start guessing. Okay, how does it end? How does it end? And in your case, yeah, we sort of know the ending, or we kind of know what's going on, but how it all unfolds and what impact this all has, that's what's really interesting. And
Totally.
yeah,
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I'm excited to once we get volume 3 and 4, I'm definitely no, I'll definitely be getting it in your hands as well, because
okay.
yeah, I'm curious to see what you think. At the end, I'll be expecting a brutally honest review, Nathan. So make sure
Okay.
I'm open for
All right.
it.
Cool, man. So let's look at, you hint at some interesting aspects of AI in the initial frames of the first installment. And
Totally.
I didn't get much development from this theme through the second, but I kind of expect it to play a little bit more because it's very obvious you put a good amount of thought into the specifics of how, and the language that you used to describe the relationship between human beings and AI. Um,
Totally.
I don't want to. No need to give out spoilers. But what was your thought process here, and are you going further with it?
Yeah, so yeah, there is a character right off the bat, Judy, who is John's secretary, who is an AI robot in this world. They're
Mm-hmm.
called the Drudge, who are just supposed to be just that, your personal assistants. But like
Mm-hmm.
you said, within the first few pages, immediately that also starts kind of coming into question, is what does it mean to almost be a person? And yeah, it's interesting. When I like I said, when I started writing, it was quite a few years ago, but as a people in the past 4 years now, I want to see have seen a huge increase in AI
Mm-hmm.
and in AI assisted tools, and um Mid Journey and OpenAI and whatever might be,
Mm-hmm.
DALI 2, and lots of different AI things. So it is interesting. Originally, it was just one of those, sci-fi, like, hey, it's cool. It's, it plays a very deep part in the story, having
Mm-hmm.
these Drudge and what they kind of mean to society. But now it, like you're saying, now there are there are questions like now as a society, we as a people are going to start soon asking questions about the ethics of AI. Right now, we're kind of at the ethics of using AI because, hey, it's stealing art, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But I think, in the next 5 years, the ethics of AI is going to be like, is this a person? Or maybe 5 years is too soon. I might be jumping the gun, but 10, 15, you know what I mean? Like now it's like, hey, these are tools that are not ethically sourcing their material. But that is going to be an evolving question someday in the future of like, are these are they sentient? Question mark, where I think there will always be people who adamantly will argue they're not sentient. I think, you can have 200 years down the line, have the most advanced AI in the world, and there will still be believers of people being like, these aren't sentient. And now we have people very outliers probably right now, very outliers, but people who probably say AI is sentient even now. So yeah, there's a lot of questions that I think we as a people need to ask. And in my comic, in my writing, some of those questions might be brought up of like, what is AI? What does it mean to be a human? Where do those how, are we going to cross those boundaries? Are we going to start, I don't know, putting ourselves in, what I mean? Like what
totally.
kind of questions might come up, but it's a shockingly advancing industry, AI as an industry. It's advancing at a rate that is very shocking, very shocking.
Yeah.
I remember, even a couple years ago, kind of testing out some little, art app, AI art app, and you write, people on a journey, something like that, just something small. And it's barely coherent, this painterly image. It's almost like abstract. And now if you do it, it's like a perfect image of humans on a journey. And it's like, damn, I wish we could go back to when it wasn't, because it was fun while it lasted, but now it's definitely, we're looking at like, I think there are a lot of questions on ethics about using AI in the art industry, when it's like, I think we're at a great place where it's like, hey, let's use AI to do all these terrible jobs that nobody wants to work. Those 9 to 5s.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And not substitute AI for genuine creative thinking. Yeah. Because all the AI does, it searches the internet using an extraordinarily absurd amount of resources and actually, fuel in a way, but to just stitch together a whole bunch of other stuff that's been said about it. And this question of AI, Asimov kind of set the stage when he brought out his rules of robotics. And it's incredible. Writing since has used Asimov as sort of a springboard for all this. And the discussion, it hasn't changed a whole lot. Like it hasn't made a categorical change at all. And there's nothing bad about that. It's an indication to me that we're still wrestling with these questions in the same form that we have been, or that we were like back. I don't remember when Asimov wrote the iRobot. It was, I think, 60s, but that was 60 years ago now. Oh God, I'm old.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
Yeah. But the language that you use, it struck me because I'm reading the Alchemy War series by Ian Tergelis right now, and in the first book, The Mechanicals, the language is really similar. And his setting is completely different. He calls them clackers, but not the language, but the language used is actually very different. But the ideas are, okay, this is kind of where we are right now, and I'm really interested to see how this all plays out. But
it is interesting. Like you said, it's like the questions have kind of remained the same, and I think it's almost like the question being like, is AI sentient? And we as a society have been like, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And now it's like, oh, I see the bridge. We're coming. And, it's like for the past, like you said, these were questions posed 60 years ago. That bridge was far ahead, but it was still I think we as a people have always kind of been asked questions like that. Like even when it comes to cloning, like people ask the exact same questions, like, is this a real person? You have the sci-fi, movies of people getting cloned and they're like, which one's the real, who has a soul, who doesn't? But like cloning, like Dolly the sheep, like there's clones exist, and it's, and people will have that question. So I think that question kind of plagues us as a society, as like, what is a human? What is a soul? And so when you start introducing other elements of like, okay, well now we have robot souls and now we have clone souls, and people start losing their mind. And what before was like a concept of people as a society going like, is it is it real? Is it a person? Now we're broaching that bridge. Like I said, we said we'll cross that bridge, and now we're not. I don't think we're crossing yet. Like I said, there might be some people who will say, hey, Chat GPT's got a soul, I promise, but I don't think we're there yet personally.
No, yeah. Well, I don't think ChatGPT is anything like what we would call intelligence. It's just a very high-powered search engine.
Yeah, exactly. It's a new school Ask Jeeves. Yeah, but I think that bridge is coming up. That is AI sentient. The question, I think that bridge is coming up sooner than later. And I think if you were to ask me 2 years ago, I'd be like 100 years. But seeing how fast like generative AI has evolved, now I'm like, man, it might be like, I think we might be getting closer than we originally thought.
I'm not going to offer any predictions right now.
Yeah, no, totally. That's fair. Very fair. I don't want to jump into conspiracy theory world.
Yeah. And the way Sam Altman talks about AI, I'm like, no, dude, the category, the structure of AI right now can't do what you're saying it does. But totally. Another discussion. So you've already mentioned a little bit about how you started coordinating with your illustrator and how you found an illustrator. Totally. I'm a little bit curious here because we've just been talking about AI. You decided to go with a human illustrator rather than have AI generated images. And
yes.
Was that a difficult decision? And because having a human illustrator, a lot more expensive.
Yeah, it wasn't a difficult decision. Okay. At the end of the day, I'm pretty outspoken about it, even to other authors who might, they're not writing comics, so they're only writing, let's say they're writing a book and they just need one image just for their front cover. Even then, I'm like, dude, get an artist. Like there's like, I get it. Not everyone has the expendable cash, like, but also like there's so many ways about it, you know what I mean? And then when it comes there's two things to tack on it. So if you're just getting a front cover and that's all you're an author, you're not writing comics, you're just getting a front cover, like that's one page. Like someone will do that. And again, I get it's a tough world we're living in right now. I'm not going to say it's not, but it's a tough world, and to like, it is a tough world, and that's why you should hire an artist. Like to be an artist and to put it's all your
for the artists too.
Exactly, and to see your art being and potentially some of these artists are having their art being put into these AI databases, but you can also like find an artist on cheap by just, again, there's artists who are saying, hey, I'm just trying to build my portfolio. And maybe they won't have the professionalism that you'd want from someone, who charges, let's say $300 a page, whatever might be the case. You have to find that medium between like the top tier artist with top tier pay versus maybe a lower tier artist who's just trying to build their portfolio. I say just even if it takes time to save up, you can, like, worst case scenario, have a black page and just your title and just say coming soon. I don't know. Again, I get that it's tough. I'm not trying to ever say like scrounge up $100 and just do it. It's a tough world. I get it, but it's a tough world for these artists as well. And I'm pretty adamantly against it. And like I said, I was an artist of like, I did doodles myself, we'll say. And I was like, I can't do this myself. And it is tough. It's an expense. It is for sure expense. You're paying for the artist's time. It's very worth it. And it takes time. Like that's part of the reason why there's a full year between volume 1 and volume 2 of my comic is because there were times where I personally might not have had all the expendable cash needed to pay for his time. So he's got a couple projects on the go as it is, and I'm paying as I can, and we're making it work as a team. We're collaborating really well. He of course has my best interest at heart, and I have his, and cool. That's a lot. That's what it takes, is a lot of communication to work with an artist. But yeah, at the end of the day, using generative AI, especially in a comic book format where there's so many pages, it's not just a front cover, it's however many pages is your comic, like you're stealing from someone somehow. There is theft involved in AI, and again, it's hard, it's tough. There's always going to be someone, and if it takes time, it takes time. But I think if you truly love your project, like I couldn't imagine. There would be a sense of irony if I used AI to do it. Like I would see some kind of interesting sense of irony, but
yeah, well, you can't be playing into the dystopia. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
criticizing.
I would be playing very much into the dystopian feel of it. But I just personally, because this is my passion like I said, I've been writing. I've gotten a bunch of short stories, and I've been writing a long time. But this one has really, really spoken to me enough where I've gone and rewritten and done it and made sure that it is a really good reflection of what I want to put out in the world. The last thing I want then is to be like to rip off an artist or to not collaborate. And when you have an artist who sees the vision and wants to put in the work, that's huge. So I don't mean to like stand on I don't mean to be a preacher and start thumping there, but sure. I don't want to talk down to anyone or anything like that. But I just firmly believe in artists supporting artists and indie creators supporting indie creators, and that's what an artist is. He's another indie creator, and if you're an author, I just believe in a supportive community, and that's the end of my TED Talk.
Cool, man. So these first two installments, you gave them to me in PDF format. They're not published yet. Is that they're not available to the public?
They are. So we did physical print.
You did?
For
cool.
Kickstarter. Yes. So there was a limited run for the Kickstarter. I have a few left over. I had sent you some digital ones because I didn't know how many I'd have left over after the Kickstarter, but I do have a couple that I have put aside for review copy. I'd love to send it to you. But yeah, there are more available. There's I'm working with an artist, digital artist, Natex, who runs a site, Northridge Studios, who this is the first comic under Northridge Studios, with others soon to come. But yeah, it's there's a few more print. I'm handling like all the prints of the comics myself. But if you go to the website, northridgestudios.com, that's where you can at least check it out. And I think we're working at getting it in a couple shops up here in Canada.
Nice.
That's the plan. That's the goal. So nothing written in stone yet. Of course, we're all blue sky thinking, but we're working to start getting it out there. That's the goal. And I would rather have like put some of my own personal money to get a bunch printed, and even if I have to hand it out and be like, take it, I want people to read it. I think it starts off a little like it starts off pretty. I think once you start digging into it, you start going. The more and more questions start arising that bring up curiosity for those future installments.
Yeah, I can see. Like I do almost all my reading on a Kindle right now, and just because physical books right now are problematic because it's a space concern.
No doubt.
Yeah, but reading a comic book and something that is so visually focused, I imagine like having a physical copy of. Well, even when I was reading the digital version, I'm like, a physical version of this would actually be, the experience and the aesthetic of reading that, I think might be a little bit superior, or maybe a lot bit superior to reading a digital copy. Is that a common sentiment among comic book folks?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it even kind of goes back to what I was thinking originally when I was writing it as a novel, and then going, you know what, this is, I'm going to flip this and make it a comic. I think part of the visual aspect, having it in your hands, having it a tangible thing, you don't get the luxury of, pinch and zoom, but you get to have it in your hands. And yeah, I think it's, there's actually, I've had a couple backers from who've backed volume 1 that as a digital backer, that when they backed volume 2, they actually backed as physical and then got the catch up to get the version 1 sent as a physical item. So clearly it's left some kind of mark that people do kind of want that tangible comic in their hands.
Yeah, can totally see that. So when can we expect some future installments, like 3 and 4?
Yeah, 3 and 4. The goal is 2025. So early 2025 for volume 3 and end of 2025 for volume 4. Again, that just goes back to just, working with an artist. And there's, we've gone over the volume 1 and 2 being the smallest of the volumes. Now 3 and 4 are starting to get, each volume being each volume is 2 chapters, and volume 3 is chapter 5 and 6. Chapter 5 is longer than all of volume 1. alone.
Okay.
So they're big. They start really climbing in size. So we'll the goal is by the end of 2025 to have all of it completed, and by 2026 jumping into the sequel. And again, it's a spiritual successor. John Black's story is all wrapped up in Children of the Night. That's an A to Z. But the sequel will be 2026. So that'll be
cool.
That'll be a fun one.
So is chapter 5, since it's so long, is that linked with 2 tracks on the album Skull and Shark?
Yes.
Or is it just one really? Oh, it is 2.
So,
okay.
So there's, each one is, I think there are 2 or 3. So after chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all about that length, all about 4. I don't want to say any numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but each one are decent length. But yes, most of them are 2 or 3 tracks now. So some chapters are only 1 track, 2, but there's at most 3 tracks per chapter.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Awesome, man. So, and we can expect 3 and 4 in 2025, and
that's
then
right.
2026 holds other things in the wake.
Yes, the untitled sequel. Should be an interesting one.
Cool, man. All right, hey Fergus, it's been awesome talking with you. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this, and it's been a great conversation. It's been really fun.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks so much, Nathan. And I've had a great chat here, and really appreciate connecting with you here.
Cool. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk then.